So the whole first class really is about relationships precede everything. Second class, teleology, from the Greek. Any Greek scholars in here? Telos, meaning the end. Ology, meaning the study of. Teleology is the study of the end. Lauren Lewis is a Presbyterian minister here in town. He says it's the most interesting word in the Bible that's not actually in the Bible. Because what it means is each one of us has a destiny. It means that an apricot seed will not create an oak tree. It can't. An oak tree cannot turn into a cypress. Each one of us has that seed inside of us of who we're going to be. Teleology is the becoming of something, the becoming of who we were meant to be. Lauren would talk about how if you're in the valley in California and you pick a peach off of a tree and you bite into it, it's like the best tasting peach you'll ever have. He says in Colorado, you've never had a peach. He says because by the time the peaches get here, if they were picked ripe, they're all bruised. If they're picked before they're ripe, they're all hard. He says a ripe peach is a great example of teleology. That peach has become what God gave it the orientation to become. It reached its full point of fruition. It has grown to be what it's destined to be. That becoming is what teleology really is. The study of the end is really the study of becoming, turning into what we were meant to be. What we know is that the myth of the well-balanced child or the well-rounded child is just that. It's a myth. None of us are well-rounded. Some of us sing great, some of us dance, some of us know mathematics, some are great in science, some of us are awesome as actors. We all have different skills. Finding that skill or that sweet spot in our life is what teleology is all about. Each one of us is different. And different is not wrong. This is the key to this whole class. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are a climbing vine, okay? You're a gorgeous climbing vine. You're the best climbing vine in the world. And you have attached yourself to the outside of the Harvard Business School. And you climb up the side of this business school and you meet your wife there. You're both on the side of this business school. You look beautiful. People walk by you. Thousands of people walk by all the time. Look at this and say, wow, it's the most beautiful climbing vine in the world. You have your first child, your son, and he follows in his parents' ways. And he's stronger and better than both of you, and you're both so proud. Then you have your second child. And your second child is a rubber tree plant. And you're embarrassed. You know, we're all up here, we all look good, we've worked hard, we work out, we're strong, we're attractive, and here you are. You sit down there, you're only 1.5 feet tall, you're short, you're squatty, you have these big fat leaves, and you just sit there. You don't do anything, nothing, all day long. You're lazy. And we try and we try and we try and get you to climb on the wall, but you won't do it. And so, you know, we've put you through special ed, we've given you certain types of medication. We've gotten you evaluated by a pediatrician. We've even tried supplements. We put tons of money into you going to special schools. We've tried taking you to a psychiatrist. We've tried day treatment programs. We've tried everything in the world. Nothing works. And the part that irritates all of us is that you don't even try. There's not even an element of you that even moves towards the wall at all. You just sit there. Why? Why doesn't he grab the wall and do like the rest of us? Because he's not. He's a rubber tree plant. That's not what rubber tree plants do. He just sits there. And it's our problem that we expect him to be a climbing vine, right? So who's the rubber tree plant? Question number 4. The rubber tree plant is anyone who's different. My daughter, I have 2 daughters. One of them is very scholastic and very linear and very pragmatic. She went through high school fast as can be. She knew exactly what grade she needed. She knew exactly what classes she needed. She didn't get more, but she didn't get less. She knew exactly she needed a 3.25 to get into CSU. She got it. She needed a certain amount of SATs. She got it. Didn't do one bit of work extra. She was just streamlined. Went straight to college. My second child, her second semester in her sophomore year, she had a 0.5. Not something 0.5, a 0.5. She had a sleep issue. She did not sleep well. And that we started to discover more and more about that. And by the time she graduated, she was doing quite well. She went off to to Fort Lewis, and she graduated from there with a 3.5 and spent a year in Europe. Very bright, very capable, but not the same as my first daughter. Where my first daughter was very linear and very practical, this one is very ethereal, very magical. She was, anything creative made her happy. Art, music, dance, writing. But she wasn't motivated by the typical things, A, B, C's, and D's. Punishments meant very little to her. And so one day she said, "Dad, am I the rubber tree plant?" So the joke in our family was, when I wrote this book, Alex helped me write it, Kelsey tested it. And in some sense she was, because she was different. And we had a mindset in our family that this is how you go through high school. This is how you do it. This is how you go to college. This is how you do it. And that wasn't her. So she was going in a very different direction. It's very difficult if you're a climbing vine, you're married to a climbing vine, and you have your first child's a climbing vine, to understand that the rubber tree plant is not broken. They're not a broken version of a climbing vine. They're different. And that's what we're going to learn about today in this class. We're going to learn a lot about what does it mean to be different. And is different okay? Teleology is important to this. I have the wrong piece of paper. Do we have another one, Michael? Here it is. Spencer brought it to me. Even though I wrote it, I still need the answers. Okay, we're going to leave teleology alone for a moment. We're going to talk about what's called frame of reference. The first step to understanding what makes others, of how others are different from ourselves, is to have a better understanding of what makes them tick. Some people like the word tick better than teleology. What makes people tick? What makes them who they are? So we're going to talk about something in physics called vector theory. Any scientists in the room? A vector is something that has direction and magnitude and determines the position of one point in space relative to another. That's the scientific definition. It's also the social definition. And we'll talk about that in a second. I've got my hand in an eraser, and I'm going to throw it across the room. A vector is an invisible force. Okay? What are the invisible forces acting on that eraser? Gravity. That's why it's down there, right? No gravity, it'd still be up here somewhere, right? What else? Momentum. It wouldn't be over there if I didn't throw it. It'd still be right here. What's the third one? Resistance or the air resistance. If there was no gravity and no resistance, it would have hit that wall. It just would have kept going. As Newton tells us, an object in motion stays in motion. An object at rest stays at rest. So here's an interesting thought for us. If we take the concept of teleology and the concept of vector theory and apply it to human relationships, it's interesting because humans have vectors too. And let's think about a vector. A vector is something that's invisible, but it has force, okay, and direction. So it pushes us in a direction. Remember, we went that way instead of that way or that way. That's the force, me pushing it, and direction, it going that way. So when we apply this to our own lives and we apply it to the social field instead of the scientific field, what we end up with the 7 key vectors in our own personal lives. Okay, these are invisible forces that push us in a direction. What do you think these vectors are? Now, you've probably heard the phrase nurture versus nature. That means we're born, the nature side of us, with certain drives. Sex drive, food drive, drive to stay alive, maternal instincts. These are drives we're born with. But then as we grow up, the world forms us, and that's the nurturing side of the world. So there's nature, what we're born with, and nurture, the world that kind of pushes us in certain directions. The number one most powerful vector, now again, these are, you'll see on your sheets there, you'll see I say typically, because there are some occasions where these are not accurate, and there's lots of examples of that, but the typical person, the key vector in all of our lives is our family of origin. That's number one. What do you think the second vector is? The culture we grew up in. Third is the current family we're in. Now, as you start getting down to 4, 5, 6, and 7, they become what we call user-defined. Everybody's going to be a little different. But typically, those first 3 are the most powerful vectors in your life. Where you came from, the culture that you came from, and the family that you're currently in. Typically, 4th is going to be friends. 5th will be church. 6th will be work. And interestingly, 7th is the media that we live within. Okay? Now, as you can imagine, if you don't go to church, that's not going to be number 5. If you don't have a job, that won't be number 6. So those last 4 are going to be self-defined. But you can see where we're going. Each person could fill this out and put in what are the 7 vectors that influence their lives. Now, what's interesting is when these 7 vectors have different opinions, right? So work and church may have different opinions of what has value. Or they may have the same opinion. We value money and time, but compete with each other. It's not unusual for all of these to compete with each other. So what we're going to do now is a little exercise, and all of you guys online need to do this as well. I want you guys to take out a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, I want you to write down what is the considered success from my family of origin. Okay, we're going to take a moment. We're going to talk about what equals success in my family of origin. And what I want you to do is I want you to be honest about this. Okay, I want you to dig a little deep and say, what is it that my family values as success? Because the second question that we're going to ask is, how has that played out in your life compared to how your family of origin is? And I will say that at the end of this, we're going to ask people to share this. No one is required to. So you can absolutely keep it to yourself. This part of this class has produced more tears than anything else that we do in all 4 of the classes. And that's how powerful families of origin are. And what's interesting is when our families of origin are very strong and the culture we come from is very strong, then we marry someone who's obviously from a different family of origin and likely from a different culture. And then those values collide. So let me give you an example of some situations I've had. I had someone in one of my classes say, what's valued in my family of origin is thriftiness. We're from a Norwegian family of immigrants. You always have your hands busy. You're always doing something, okay? That's what's important in my family, is being thrifty. People who make a lot of money but waste it are looked down upon by my family. If you're poor, you're not looked down upon as long as you're thrifty and you make good use of what you have. So that was an interesting one. I had another woman who said that in her family, being thin was the ultimate winner. And she said she was a little bit overweight. And she says, I'm a little chubby, but she says, my family can't stand it. She was the director of human resources for a fairly large company here in Colorado Springs. She made more than everybody else in the room combined. All of our salaries didn't add up to hers. So she made a good salary. She had a beautiful house. She had a husband. She had 2 kids. She said, but I can't lose weight. So I'm 20, 30 pounds overweight, and my mom never lets me forget it. And she says, my sister, however, multiple failed marriages, never got it past high school. I have a master's degree. And yet she's the hero of the family because she's thin. So she said every year at Christmas I would get a sweater. And I knew what it was because it's the same sweater every year, different colors, different types, but it was always 2 sizes too small. And so I would wait for Mom to call me at the end of end of Christmas Day around 5 or 6 and say, "Did you get the sweater I sent you?" And I'd say, "Yep." She said, "Did you like it?" And I said, "Well, it's 2 sizes too small, so I don't know." Mom says, "Oh dear, have you gained some weight?" And she says, I would always say, "Nope, same weight I was last year when you sent me a sweater that was 2 sizes too small." And then Mom says, "Well, I'm just worried about you." So that's an example of somebody who the value in their family was being thin. Not successful, not happy, not married, but being thin. I had Steve and Pashira in the class. Steve was a fighter pilot that later became a commercial airplane pilot. Pashira was from Thailand. And they looked like models, both of them, tall, beautiful. And I think she went by Posh, and it was short for Pashira. And she said, in her family, marrying well is the deal. Because we all lived in Thailand. We lived somewhere that's poor. I married a fighter pilot and now a commercial airplane pilot, and we send money back home. I am the winner in the family. So the question is, what in your family is success? We're going to take a few minutes and write it down. What you don't want to say is Pollyanna answers. My family considers success that we do the things in life that make us happy. No family does that, okay? No. Families consider money, or they consider, these families, different things are important. So let's take 5 minutes, and everyone write down on a piece of paper what is considered success. No Pollyanna answers in your biological family. A good friend, his name is Patrick. Patrick's about 6 feet tall, maybe 135 pounds. String bean. He's very tall. He's very slender. He has a PhD in English, and he is a professor at a university in Seattle. And a very, very, very bright person. He's actually written books on poetry. You would think this is a very successful person. His family considers him the black sheep. They're all from Boston, and he told me about them. His dad was a Marine, and then after he left the Marines, he became a Boston City cop. His granddad was also a Boston City cop. His brother was a Marine and then a Boston City cop. And Patrick teaches poetry. He said, "You know what they do for fun at my house on St. Patrick's Day?" Take a guess. They get very, very drunk. Who can get the drunkest is the winner. What's the other thing they do? He says, we have contests, like we stick out our arms, and someone takes a match or a lighter and puts it under the arm and see who flinches first. He says, "I'm not interested. I don't play any of those games. There's a reason I live in Seattle and they live in Boston. I love them, but I am a failure in their eyes." My best friend, who I grew up next to, were the Caseros. My father and their parents were at the University of Florida together. Mickey their father was studying engineering. My dad was getting his degree in psychology. Mickey, his full name is Michelangelo Casero. Michelangelo Casero's first generation immigrant, okay? And Michelangelo Casero believes that you gotta be self-sufficient in America, and the way you're gonna become self-sufficient in America is, you guys can stay in here, don't leave on our behalf. It's okay. I don't want you to miss class. Crying babies is just part of Hope at Home. So Michelangelo Casero, he's Italian, Catholic. He marries Kay Casero, she's Irish, and they have 6 kids. Their first son's name is what? Michelangelo Casero Jr., absolutely. And Michelangelo Casero Sr. has his PhD in engineering. He's the head of the engineering department at the University of Louisville. His first son, all of the Casero kids have to get their degrees as engineers, because once you're an engineer, then you can always have a job, okay? So and they got to go for free because he was the head of the department. So his son gets his degree as a PhD in engineering, and then he goes back to school and gets his MD and becomes an anesthesiologist. And then he goes and gets his Juris Doctorate, becomes an attorney, and specializes in pain cases, okay? Med mal cases. Second child is my friend Kevin. We'll go back to him. Third child is Molly. Molly gets her bachelor's in engineering, then becomes an attorney and represents her husband in a business venture where they run all 5 of the main emergency rooms in Louisville, seven counties area. Her husband's an emergency room doc, and so they do that. Next one's Katie. She has her master's in engineering. Next one's Maggie. She also has her degree in engineering. The next one is Matt, and he has his master's in business and also a PhD in engineering, runs the family engineering firm. Kevin, my friend, who is my age, dropped out of high school. He is the rubber tree plant, okay? He is the failure, the black sheep of this family, as you can imagine. He couldn't make it through high school. He got a GED. He then goes off to college, can't make it through college, drops out, humiliated. He leaves Louisville. He goes to Arizona. He ends up with a girl. She gets pregnant. They have children. They get married. They get divorced. He goes back home. His parents say what to him? Go back to school. You need to go back to school. So he enrolls in school. He drops out of school. He goes back to Arizona, marries another lady, has another kid, 2 kids, beautiful kids, Kayla, and I can't remember the other child's name. And then that falls apart. He goes back to Louisville. His parents like, you need to go back to school, right? Well, Kevin is not scholastically inclined. So what Kevin did, Kevin's the man from Mars, by the way. I'll give away the ending. He's the man from Mars. It's not in here. Don't need to look for it. And so Kevin is good at working with his hands. So he gets a job at a dealership, and what he does, a car dealership, is he goes in the middle of the night and he gets rid of bumps and dings, and he's really good at that. And as a result of being able to do this, he decides to start a business. And his family's got money, so the family bankrolls him. In the middle of the night, he goes to dealerships and fixes the stuff that cars have when they get brought in, traded for another car. So he fixes dings and scratches and brakes and stuff like that. Well, he gets really successful with this because he's really pretty good. So he gets himself a couple of trucks. Before you know it, he's got himself a bay, and he's got a repair shop, and he's got people working for him. And now he gets on TV in Louisville. If you're in Louisville, you've seen Kevin on TV. He says, "Hi, I'm Kevin. I'm the man from Mars." And that's the mobile auto repair service. At one point in time, Kevin made more money than everybody else in the family. He was the most successful member of the family. Question. Did he cease to be the black sheep? No. Because now, his parents said, you got all this money, you can go back to school. Because that's the solution to everything, go back to school. Whereas in Patrick's world, school meant nothing. Now, I had a couple in here that was a really interesting couple because we went through this process, and you could tell this couple was struggling. They were talking, laughing, and pointing at each other. Well, so I asked them, about their families of origin. She came from, she's from Illinois, and she was in a farm, big farm. And he was from Pittsburgh, and he's a union worker, steel worker. I said, oh, that's interesting. I said to the woman who came from the farm, when's work done? Never. Work is never done. There's a hole in the fence at 4 in the morning, you're out there. She says, there are many times when I went to bed and I could see the light creeping in my window, hoping to get enough sleep before I had to get up and take care of the chickens. Work is never done. I said to him, when's work done? 5 when the whistle blows. And you know what? You drop that tool, because if you hold on to it, you're a scab. You are hurting the union when you hold on to work and do work past that, because if they can get free work from you, you're undermining our negotiations. So how's that work out for you guys? He says, it's not easy. They talk about how, they were visiting her parents. And she says the living room was getting really, really tense, because you could go around the living room and everyone in the living room was working on something, except her husband, who was sitting in an easy chair, drinking a beer, watching TV. And this turned into an argument, and she got embarrassed, and she had to say to him, you need to be doing something. He's like what? Shuffling papers, or braiding something, or cleaning something. He's like, why? He says, because work is never done. If you do that, you're sloughing off and the rest of the house is looking at you. He's like, the world I come from, you work really, really hard. When you're done, you're done. And I'm not going to go work some more. So this became a real issue for him because of this very issue. Both of them perceive things differently. Question for you guys. What's a good work ethic? What's that?
One that provides for your basic needs.
Well, I heard someone in the middle.
Cradle to grave.
Cradle to grave. That's a good work ethic. Well said. What did you say, Brian?
One that makes like survival
Uh-huh.
on some level.
All right, my dad, I'm almost 60. So my dad was not quite the Great Generation, but kind of around that era. He would have been one of the younger members of the Great Generation. The Great Generation's, the one that most of the viewers' grandparents were in. The average grade level was 6th grade. This is the group that went to World War II. This is the group that built all our highways. My dad would say, a good work ethic is very simple. In fact, he did say this. Whatever you do, regardless of whether you're paid a lot or a little, regardless of whether you even get paid, your name is on it, so you do the best job you can. Who would agree with that work ethic? That's my dad's generation. And I believe that. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it really well and the job's going to get done because my name's on it. Even if I agreed to do it for a quarter. My dad would tell me that he took jobs as a janitor while he was working in college. He said, well, I sometimes work for a quarter an hour, but I'm going to do the same job for a quarter an hour as I do for $100 an hour because my name's on it. That's a work ethic. Alfredo Gonzalez married Evangelina, and they adopted a child from Hope and Home. And Alfredo Gonzalez told me that he was in the, now Alfredo's my age, so again, he's about 60 years old. So we're going to go back in time 50 years. So we go back in time 50 years. He was in the United States, in California, and he was here illegally. His parents came across the border. They lived in a one-room house that was not a legal house. It was more of a storage unit. No windows, no doors, no heat, no air conditioning. It was a storage unit. And there were 4 kids, mom and dad. Dad was a cook. Dad got a job. He'd go around different places. He got a job working for some sort of a Chinese restaurant. And it was a great job because they worked him for 10 to 12 hours a day, and they guaranteed him work for 30 days in a row. And the family, this was awesome because he'd only had little bits and pieces of job until he got this job. This was a big deal. Alfredo remembers it to this day, the day his dad got this amazing job. And the family really had to make do because dad was gone all the time. So dad's in this job, he's working 10 to 12 hours a day, 30 days in a row. At the end of the 30 days, the guy who owned the restaurant said, bye-bye. You got a problem with that? Why don't you go tell immigration? Call the police on me. Alfredo Gonzalez says a good work ethic is get the money first. Because that's where he came from. That was his experience with his dad doing that, and it almost destroyed their family. Because they'd racked up debts and they had issues during that time, and they were counting on that money. He says a good work ethic is you get the money first. I hired one of my foster kids. Her name was Tara, and she still stays in touch with me. She wished me happy birthday just a little while ago, and so we talk all the time or not all the time, but every once in a while we talk on Facebook. Tara was a 15-year-old kid, and she turned 18. She was still here at Hope and Home, and we gave her a job. We made her the evening receptionist. And part of her job was to do the dishes right before support group, and she refused to do it. And I would go talk to her. I said, Tara, support group's coming in. We need to do the dishes. The dishes have been left out all day. Don't want them sitting out for support group. We're in a different building, and there was no way for you guys to come into support group without seeing all these dirty dishes. So it was the job of the evening receptionist to clean all the dishes. And she taught me a word I'd never heard before. It was like an H-S-U-A. It was like, shuh. I'm like, what? I said, you need to do the dishes. And she'd say, shuh. And I think it means like, yeah, right. Okay. Anyone else hear that word? Shuh? No. Yeah. And so I'm like, Kara, no, I'm serious. I need you to do the dishes. This is your job. She's like, yeah, right. Sure. I'm like, Tara, seriously. And it got bad where I'm like, Tara, you have to do, she's like, you want me to be somebody's N-word. That's what you want me to be. And being a foster kid, she used the N-word. I'm like, that's not okay either, okay? The shell word and the N-word, not okay. I need to do the dishes. She says, I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to do it. So everybody, all day long, makes a mess. They can make the biggest mess they want. And at the end of the day, you want me to come in and clean it. I'm like, I guess if that's how you're looking at it, I'm looking at it more like we have dishes, they're dirty, it's the board of group starting, it's your job, clean the dishes. It got to where she would quit, and I would have had to fire her if I went any further. But it was right around the same time as I heard Alfredo's story, and I started thinking about this, so I started talking to her. And what I realized that for her, this was an issue of pride, and this was an issue of self-respect. That if other people are allowed to just wreck stuff, and you have to pick it up, you're lower than they are. So I said, Tara, this is ridiculous. You're going to force me to fire you over the fact that you won't do these dishes. Now, from my perspective, I'm looking at it like she's got a bad work ethic. She's like Alfredo. She's looking at it from the perspective of, I'm being self-protective. I'm sticking up for my self-esteem. I'm not okay with everyone in this office treating me like I'm their little slave and they can make a big mess and leave it to Tara, and Tara will have to clean it. So once I understood where she was coming from, then it's like, okay, now we can work on this, okay? I get it. But I got upset at first, and I pushed as hard as I could short of firing her. It wasn't going to work. And that's when I realized I got to take a step back and think about this. And I took a look at it from a different frame of reference. When I looked at it from her frame of reference, when I thought about Alfredo's frame of reference, then it started making some sense to me. I don't come from that world. And so I don't have any problem if someone says mow the lawn, I mow the lawn, then you're going to give me something that's fair. I haven't had someone cheat me, nor do I have someone treat me like I'm lesser of a human being because I'm doing work. So my solution to this, Tara, what if you and I do the dishes together? Suddenly, all the pride stuff is gone because the CEO of the company is doing the dishes. And so I tried to teach her something about servant leadership. It didn't go very far, but as long as we were doing the dishes together, she was fine with it. Does this make sense? The same principle, but plays out in very different ways. When I think someone is lazy, you know, I'm like, you're just being lazy. No, she isn't. When Alfredo's like, I want to see the money first, you're not being greedy. We all have a good work ethic. It's just playing out in a different kind of way. And the generations that we're from and the family of origins that we're from, very much, with Alfredo's issue, it was very much a cultural issue, but it was also a family of origin issue. And his family of origin, if he did something without getting paid, then you didn't learn anything from what happened to your dad. And that means you're an idiot. Okay? So we start to see how these things start to play out. When someone says to you guys, what kind of values do you have? What kind of answer do you give them? What are your values? What do you think about when someone asks that question? Any Boy Scouts in the room? What are the values of the Boy Scouts? Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind,
brave, clean, and reverent.
and clean and reverent. Thank you. It was a long time ago. Aren't those the kind of things that we think about when we hear the word, what are your values? Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, clean, kind, right? What are other values that you look for in other people? What are values that are important to you? I need an answer from someone out back there. What's a value that's important to you in other people? Loyalty. Me too. Most corporations have values. One of the values that's really important to us is that you're aligned. Our staff is aligned. We're all going the same way. Christian values are important to us. Loyalty is important to us. What are some of the other ones that are important to you guys? Honesty. Super important. Good one.
I think a lot of times people's values are what drivers behind what they define as success. It goes back to our exercise.
Very, very, very well said. What's interesting is when we think of values, we typically think of big words. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly. These are big values, okay? There's also what they call micro values, all kinds of embedded values. An embedded value is a value that you don't see up front, but it's embedded in you. So when we talk about what happened with the families of origin, those are what are called embedded values. Thriftiness. No one would ever say thriftiness is one of my values in life. Hard work ethic. Standing up for the union. These are what are called embedded values. You don't see them, but they come out. Journalists use the words embedded values, and they're talking about something a little bit different. Have you ever heard of the phrase embedded values from a journalistic perspective? In journalism, they teach embedded values. I can show you how to find embedded values in about 2 seconds. The next time you're online, go to CNN, read the headlines, go to Fox News, read the same headlines. Okay? You will see the same story reported in almost exactly an opposite way. The good guys over here are wearing the white hats, and suddenly they're the bad guys over here in the black hats. Exact same story. And you can pick out what are the embedded values of the reporter. That reporter has values, and that's why they wrote this story the way they did. I'll give you an example. Let's talk about immigration, okay? 2 candidates believe that immigration should change. Let's assume that. One of them believes in amnesty. The other one believes in immigration reform. Okay? What is the embedded values in those words? What is the value of the person that says, I believe in amnesty as a solution to our immigration problem, versus someone that says, I believe in reform as a solution to our problem? What are the embedded values in those 2 characters? Take a shot. What does the person who thinks amnesty, what is he basically saying with that word? Forgiveness. And so we are going to forgive the illegal people for doing illegal things, and we're going to be big enough to forgive you and let you stay here even though you committed these crimes. We're going to give you amnesty. Okay? How about immigration reform? What's their perspective? You didn't do anything wrong. Our system is broken. We're going to reform the system. Do you see how the white hats and the black hats switched? The first person that's talking about amnesty is saying, all the people that are over here are illegal and they committed crimes, but we're going to let them stay and give them amnesty. Okay? Take a step over here. The person that talks about immigration reform says, you guys did nothing wrong. Our system has unjustly been persecuting you. We're going to reform a hostile system. Wouldn't take too long to figure out which one's on Fox and which one's on CNN. I'm not asking anyone this is not about politics. The point is, embedded values, that's where they start coming out. Okay? So those are values that are embedded in that story by the reporter who has a certain set of values. You can figure out where his perspective is or her perspective is by digging into the embedded values. Okay? So I was just talking about embedded values a moment ago. Work ethic is an embedded value. It's one that you don't see on the surface. We talk about trustworthy, loyal, honesty, those sort of things. But these are the embedded values that lie beneath the surface in that. Does that make sense? Questions? So we have to talk about number 8. Santa presents. Are they wrapped or unwrapped? Who says wrapped? Who's?
Some are in the stocking and some aren't.
Okay, some are in the stocking, some aren't. So one person says both. This group over here says they're wrapped. Over here I heard unwrapped. Tell me about that. Why are Santa presents unwrapped?
That's the way my parents did it.
Exactly. It's just the way it's right. All right. Do you open Christmas presents on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve? Christmas Day. Who says Christmas? Who does only on Eve? Some people just do Eve. I have German friends. They only do it on Christmas Eve. There's a whole thing about that. I don't remember what it was. But there's something about St. Nicholas and Christmas Eve. All right, who says both? Okay, of those who say both, is it one present on Christmas Eve?
Yes. One.
Is it usually pajamas?
Yes.
There you go.
So that on Christmas morning your pictures are really cute.
Yep.
Yes.
And so my wife and I, we always bought pajamas for our kids. They opened on Christmas Eve. And one year they told us, we have to tell you, we hate the pajamas. But here's the question. My oldest daughter is now 30 years old. She and her husband are now thinking about having a baby. When they have that baby, what will they do on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve?
Open Christmas pajamas.
They will, I guarantee you, they will open Christmas pajamas. It's an embedded value, right? And it's not worth fighting over. It's not a huge issue. But I'll tell you, I've had couples where one did Christmas Day and one did Christmas Eve, and some where Christmas presents, Santa presents are always wrapped, and some when they aren't. And in my family, the Santa presents were wrapped, but in Santa paper, which you had to hide from year to year because it would give it away. Did you do that? There you go. So
But we don't.
you don't. When families come together and these are serious issues, it can be very difficult because you're outing Santa if you go to their house and you don't do the things that they did, right? All right, comfort food. What is it? Starbucks chai.
Mashed potatoes.
Mashed potatoes, what do you guys say back there? Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and lots of gravy, right?
Potato soup.
Potato soup. What else? Down the valley, it's got to be something with potatoes. What else? Sometimes with kids, macaroni and cheese, right? Think about when a kid comes into your home, okay? They're going to be a stranger in a strange land. They got to get used to what your foods are, what your traditions are, what your Christmases are, what your Christmas Eves are. Whenever a family and another family come together, there's a process, and we don't really have time to talk about it, but sociologists call the process of two cultures coming together the process of assimilation. Assimilation is we're going to absorb you into us, and accommodation. This isn't on the sheet, but it should be. Assimilation means you're going to come into our home and we're going to make you like us. Accommodation means you're going to come into our home and we're going to change the things that we do to meet you. Okay? This has to go on in every family. Make it a thoughtful process. Assimilation is important. Accommodation's more important. Families that are high on accommodations do well in foster care. Families that require pure assimilations fail. It's that simple. If you expect a child will completely assimilate to your family and you don't have to accommodate at all, it won't work. We had a woman and her husband. I loved them dearly. They were wonderful. But I knew we had trouble the second she opened up her date book. This is before we had them in our computers and our phones. It's back in the old paper days. She opened up a day timer and it was all color-coded and it had different markers and it was all perfect. And I looked at the schedule and it was amazing. Her kids were pre-Olympic soccer players, phenomenal. And she showed me how at 6 o'clock in the morning we're doing this, at 7 we're at this. And I said, what if a foster kid comes in your home and doesn't follow the schedule? So they have to. The whole thing is like a clock. It all runs perfectly. I said, this isn't going to work for you. We had a long conversation about it. I said, this is not going to work. You're going to have caseworkers calling you at the last minute, needing you to make an appointment. You're going to have, she said, well, I can't do that. I said, no, you can't do foster care. If your schedule is so tight that you expect 100% assimilation and you're not going to make any accommodation, it's not going to work. We've had several single moms come in here and they say, do you take single moms? And we do. But we put them through a little bit of an extra task because for a lot of single moms, their lives only work if it goes along a schedule. I have to be here at this time, here at this time, here at this time, here at this time, and I don't have any accommodation because I don't have a husband to pick up any of the slack. That becomes a challenge. So our Foster Care Plus group is always looking at anyone that's single, especially single moms, especially working single moms. Do you have a support network that will give you the ability to provide accommodation? Pure assimilation won't work. On the other hand, pure accommodation doesn't work either. Why? Kids have an innate need to belong. All of us do. And so if you go to somebody's house and you're not brought in to their culture at all, you will always feel like an outsider. So when you have to accommodate them and they're assimilating you, then you start to feel like you're part of that family. We had a family that was doing very, very poorly. They were struggling like crazy. Then one day out of the blue, it was like, it was going fine. We're like, what the heck happened? They literally didn't know. They said one day it just poof, evened out. And so this is of course back in the days when we had checkbooks too. They were pieces of paper that you filled out like this, and underneath it was a carbon. I'm not kidding. Those things existed. And we had those because we didn't have credit cards. And so I said, go back through your check register and figure out, go to the day that this happened, see if you can find something. And he went back, and right around that same time was when they had a family portrait taken. And the family portrait now hangs over the fireplace with that kid as part of their family over there. That was the moment of assimilation that the kid felt like, I'm part of this family now. But that's a tricky one because they still are part of another family. And so you have to be very careful. How do we assimilate you without you feeling like we're trying to steal you or hijack you from the family you're in? When I ask other families how they've done it, some families have said, well, we have a secret handshake that only our family knows. And so we made them do it. We promised not to remember it, but we got to see the secret handshake. Others, it's nicknames. All the kids in the family have a nickname, so I gave our foster kid a nickname. Whatever we can do to give out that sense of you're being assimilated, you're part of us. You know, America's a melting pot, and that melting pot is both assimilation, bringing people in, making them Americans, but at the same time accommodating, learning about new foods, learning about different ways of being. What are your comfort foods? What do you do at Christmas? Anyone watch Friends? TV show Friends? Anyone ever see like the Thanksgiving one? When like everybody has a different way to make potatoes. Joey wants tater tots, and someone wants potatoes with peas in it. Like every member of the family had a different way to make potatoes. So Monica had to make all these different kinds of potatoes. That's an example of accommodation, bringing people in and learning what they do. Part of your job as a foster parent is whenever you bring a child into your home, figure out what's their culture, okay? And how can their culture become part of your culture? How can we do things like them? When you do icebreakers with their parents, this is a great question. What are the foods that your family likes to eat? What are the foods that he eats when he's sick and doesn't feel good? Favorite foods. Foods are very important. Traditions. What are the traditions that we have? These are our embedded values. My family, for whatever reason, first day of school, we always went to Fridays. There's a restaurant that's not here anymore, but it's down Woodman and I-25. There's no reason, but it just became a thing. First day of school, we always go after school to Fridays. We have dinner there, and we talk about the first day of school. You know, if you were to ask me what's one of my values, I would never have said going to Fridays on the first day of school. It's more of a tradition. That becomes one of our embedded values. So the number 8, Santa presents and comfort foods are examples of what type of values? Embedded. Number 9, these values create a person's frame of reference. I'll also take point of reference. Words like lazy are often derivative of an individual's frame of reference and reflect our embedded values. Embedded values come mostly from which of those 7 vectors do you think embedded values comes mostly from? Family origin or culture. It's both of those. Our culture plays a big part in our values. I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation, and I get called in as a consultant to El Paso County whenever they have Indian kids here. And there's a group of Indian kids placed at Cedar Springs Treatment Center. And I was asked to go there and talk to them because a group of kids from the Mwapo Band of Paiutes were about to be transferred over there. So I had an entire afternoon of talking about the cultural issues of working with Indians. By the time I got done, they're all very nervous. Oh boy, the Indian kids are coming. How are we going to handle it? How are we going to handle it? The kids showed up and they looked like and acted like every other kid on the planet. So they forgot everything I said. If the kids came in looking and acting completely different with headdresses and moccasins and stuff like that, then they would have been like, oh, the Indian kids are here, we have to act differently. But they came in blue jeans and sweatshirts and hoodies, and they were, acting like little gangsters and like cool little kids. And so immediately everything I taught them was gone because they normalized them. And soon enough, all the behaviors that I warned them that they're going to have to deal with started showing up. And I went back and met with them, and I was shocked. Everything I told you guys, you forgot. They did. Because the moment they met them, they normalized them and said, oh, that's just like a regular kid. No, these are kids that came right off the reservation. And they had very typical behaviors of reservation kids, and I had to walk them back through those behaviors. And again, they normalized them and to a degree even dismissed them. I said, that's what they're doing. Here's the issue. One of the things that happens on the reservation is time is not considered the same as it is off the reservation. People are raised without a sense of time. As a result, they're not going to be very good at 3 o'clock is this time, 3:15 is this time, showers are 8 minutes. They're going to be really crappy at all the time stuff. Anyone ever hear the phrase Indian time? When you're running on Indian time, you show up when you get there. You ever go to a powwow? All the times are approximate. They're going to be doing jingle dancing at about 3. Could be 3:30. And that's because it's a different embedded value in their system. But because the kids acted and looked so normal, well, of course they're just like regular kids. Nope, these values came out. Intense eye contact is considered disrespectful in most Indian cultures. So when someone says, listen to me, look at me when I talk to you, and they look down, you think they're being disrespectful. No, they're being respectful. It would be disrespectful to stare you in the eyes while you're talking to them. But again, they forgot everything I taught them because when the kids came in, they acted like normal old kids. I know kids. And so the biggest challenge with embedded values is when the degree of acculturation, the degree to which someone is different from you, is not very much. Bring someone into your home from somewhere really far away that speaks a different language and acts completely different, then we're going to be respectful of their culture, but we're going to have a harder time the closer they are to us. Okay? So the hardest part about these values are we're going to miss them because they're so subtle, and again, when they're really close to ours, then they become very difficult to pick up on, but then they can become really big. I almost fired a kid named Tara because we really had a different way of looking at something. I thought she was being disrespectful, insubordinate, and frankly lazy. And that wasn't the issue at all. Not at all. She was trying to stick up for her self-esteem, advocate for herself, things that I had taught her. But I didn't see it until we got quite a ways down the road. Okay. I'm going to try and pull this here. This is what we call the cultivation continuum. It's a continuum of behavior that is required to cultivate kids as they grow older. On the y-axis, we have 0 to 18. And on the x-axis, we're going to start over here with the word command or control. Control. Over here is collaborate. And over here is consign. Okay, if you're watching online, over here on that y-axis, we start at 0, we go up to 18. On the x-axis, we start with control. In the middle is collaboration. On the far right is consignment. Okay, anyone ever sell anything in a consignment store? No? Yes, who? Okay, what did you sell?
I think it was
Clothing. And what did they ask you when you brought it into them? They asked you a couple of questions. Yeah, that too. They went, did you steal this? And honestly, I still don't get the people that they sell copper wire to. I had a bunch of copper wire stolen from somewhere. And they said, yeah, they sold it somewhere. And I'm like, don't they where else does copper wire come from? You know, an indigent person shows up with like $40,000 worth of copper wiring that's clearly from some sort of industrial thing. And they're like, they should ask the question, did you steal it? No. Okay, I'm sure they didn't ask you if you stole the clothes. What did they ask you? My guess is they asked you how much you wanted for it, right? They want to know what you want to sell it for. And the second question they frequently ask is, how long? How long do you want to take to sell it? If you go to Play It Again Sports, they put stuff in there and they actually put the price on there. Say $200, after a certain date $175, after a certain date $150. So it goes down in price over time. So they want to know how long you want to have it for sale and what price. Do they ask you what they should pay their salesperson? No. Do they ask you how they should advertise in their store? No. Do they ask you any other sales techniques? No. Okay? When we consign something to somebody, we tell them what we want done and when we want it done, and maybe a little bit about the quality at which we want it done. Everything else is up to them. Okay? So as children get older, our goal in life is to hope that something like this happens. Okay? When they're young, we have to control them. When we have a baby in our arms, we are 100% in charge of their survival. We are in charge. We are in control. That baby has no control over its entire life. Okay? I don't remember what they are, but there's something like 5 things a baby can do. Any baby experts in here? What are the 5 things a baby can do? They breathe. They breathe. I'm talking about behaviors. What are 5 behaviors? They can root. When you go like this, they'll turn their face towards the nipple or the bottle. They have a reflex called Moro. They have one called Babinski. And they have 2 others, I don't remember what they are. But that's all they can do. They can't get food. They can't chop. They can't eat on their own. They don't have any teeth. Can't even roll over. So when they're babies, we're totally in charge, right? As they get a little bit older, we become collaborative. What's collaboration? Working together. Okay? And by the time they turn 18, we'd like them to take over, wouldn't we? More and more, this number is looking like 25. But at this point, some point out here, we want them to be in charge of their life, right? And we'd like to be able to say, you know, this is what needs to get done, but you can get it done. I trust you. Now, what's interesting, let's go back to control. In the world of control, I tell you what to do, I decide how it gets done, and I do it with you. What word is common? I. I tell you what to do, I tell you how to do it, and I do it with you. In the world of collaboration, I still tell you what to do, we decide how to do it, and we do it together. In the world of consignment, I tell you what to do, you decide how to do it, and you get it done. I, we, I, you. Notice in all 3 of these, the word I is still there. And I have to tell parents this all the time. Just because you're moving a child from control to collaboration to consignment doesn't mean that you're letting go. You're still there. You're still in charge. You're still controlling things, okay? But here, I decide what to do, I decide how to do it, and I do it with you. I decide what to do, but we're going to figure out how to do it, and you're going to do it. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. I, we, you. I, we, you. I, you. So let's take an example. We're going to church tomorrow morning. Need to be dressed and in the car by 7:30. If you have a 2-year-old, you're going to do all of that, aren't you? I'm telling you when we're going to leave. I'm telling you when we need to get ready, when we need to eat. I'm going to wake you up, and I'm going to help you get dressed. Now, I'm going to throw a couple yous in there. Why don't you tell me what clothes you'd like to wear? Okay? Why don't you tell me so we can pick it out tonight? Here, collaboration. I, we, you. I'm telling you, we're leaving at 7:30 tomorrow morning. Let's us to figure out what we need to get together, and then you do it. Okay? So if you, what are the clothes you want to wear? Okay? Are they clean or dirty? Do we need to do laundry? So I decide when we're leaving, 7:30, we brainstorm how to get it done, and I'm going to let you pull it off. Okay, kid's 17 years old. They don't want you to pick out their clothes with them. They don't want you to say, let's lay out your clothes on your bed like a clothes person, and you can just jump into them in the morning. No. They're like, Mom, just tell me when to be in the car. 7:30, I'll be there. Now, we may have to do a little more than that, like at 7:10, and we see them still asleep. We might help them with it. But the goal here is, I'm going to tell you what to do. You're going to decide how to do it, and you're going to get it done. Because guess what? A year from now, or 2 years from now when you're in college, I'm not going to be there to brainstorm how to do it with you, and I'm not going to do it for you. So, I, we, you, I, you. Our goal, whenever we can, is to push things this way. That's how we cultivate and grow kids. If we want them to end up here, we got to be pushing this way. Foster kids oftentimes live that life. When they're little, no one's paying any attention to them at all. They start getting in trouble around here, and we start to take control. And then they get arrested, so now we're going to slam the book at them, throw the book at them, and slam them down, and we're going to control everything about you. That doesn't work. It's a recipe for disaster. Our job as foster parents is to intercept right here and try and do that. Do not be surprised if you get a 7 or 8 year old in your home who feels like they're a parent, what we call parentified, and they think they're in charge. And they're telling you how to take care of the baby because they've always fed the baby and taken care of the baby. So sometimes they're already feeling like they're already out here. Our job is to help them become a kid again, get them back in the right direction, and then help them emancipate appropriately. What's interesting is Christendom, the Christian world, we sometimes screw up pretty badly because we do this a lot. Let's see if I get a different color. This is what we do sometimes. Trying to do a right turn at 18. We homeschool you. We don't let you listen to rock and roll. We make you watch VeggieTales. We're really controlling of what you watch, what you listen to, who you spend time with. Then at 18, we send you off to college. And we're shocked that you're pregnant at 19 years old. That's because we didn't prepare you. Our goals as parents is to move them this way. Now the reality is, it's not just one line, okay? Reality, it's a lot of lines, and they're all different. They're all woven together. So someone might be really doing consignment level when it comes to homework. Might have a 16-year-old who's, you don't even have to tell her anything. She gets straight A's. But when it comes to boys, we're all the way back here, or maybe back here. My advice to you as foster parents, assume they're further on this side than their age, okay? Because this is, of course, 0. We're looking at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, somewhere around 7 to 10. We're collaborating in young teen ages to teen. We're consigning. Most of our kids need to be back here a little bit, and that's okay. I also advise you to start with more controlling and then give freedom. It's always easier to give freedom than it is to take it away. Okay? Now what's interesting about this is we can layer on another graph if we want to, and that's called, if we as parents or people in our kids' lives, are we people of control or people of influence? Who's a typical person of control in your life when you were young? For me, it was the vice principal. I still remember his name. He was really terrifying. He was a person of control. He made sure everybody did things the way they should. But there was a teacher that really inspired me. He was a person of influence. As kids move from here to here, people of control become less important. People of influence become far more important. Okay? So our goal is ideally to move in the same direction as our kids, to be more controlling when they're young, but become more of a person of influence when they get older. It is normal for kids to shed the people of control in their life and seek out the people of influence. So as our kids move from control to collaboration, the successful parent moves with them. And as time goes by, we're less and less controlling and more empowering. How many people do we have in the room? 4, 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 people in the room. Let's see. 10% would be 2. We're making funny noises. 2%, 60% of 20, 12. Oops, I did it backwards. This is 2%. Okay, we're going to pass out these pieces of paper. If you're watching online, now is the time to take these pieces of paper that say Drill Sergeant on the top. I'm going to pass those out to everybody. Here's your assignment. In the next 5 minutes, read this document. Do not talk to the person next to you, especially if it's your spouse. Read these individually. When you get done reading them, turn them over. Do not talk to anyone while you're reading them. Read them alone. When you get done, turn them over. You have about 8 minutes to read the whole thing. What I want you to do at this point is everybody stand up, and I want the back of the room to be my drill sergeant in the back corner. In the middle of the room, I want my coaches, and I want my 2 professors up here with me. Do the same wherever you are. It's going to be weird for the 2 of you, but that you can do your best. So, drill sergeants all the way at the back of the room, coaches in the middle of the room, and the 2 professors up here. Do we have 3? Do we have 4? Are you a professor? Which one are you?
About a third of each.
You got to pick whichever one resonates the most with you. And some people are on the cusp, and you have to go with what is your basic nature. Okay? It's not unusual to be in between two, but not what you do for a living, but what is your basic nature. Something in those are calling out to you. Now, I can't figure out what you guys are. You're an amorphous blob. Are you in the back? Are you guys drill sergeants or are you coaches? All right, I need the drill sergeants all the way back there, coaches in the middle. Make a definition between yourselves so I can see where everybody is. Not one, there's no right or wrong.
I'm somewhere between these two.
Well, it looks like you're picking that group.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right, now, based on percentages, the world population, the coaches are roughly 16 or 60%, which would be 12. Are we have 12 in the middle? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 35% are drill sergeants. 35% of 20 would be what? 6 or 7? Yeah. You guys got 5? Okay. And then 2%, less than 10% of the world are professors. That'd be 2. We have 3. So you guys are pretty dead on in terms of the percentages. Now what's interesting is, as we look through these, the control, these are our drill sergeants, these are our coaches, these are our professors. So we're starting to match up these different parenting styles with where kids are developmentally. Now I need the drill sergeants first. Would you guys elect a member to read what yours says and read it out loud? And what I'm going to ask you to do is something different than normal. Normally you'd read it from there, but come on up here and read it in front of our camera so they can see you.
Don't forget to stand up so they can see on the camera.
The drill
Okay.
sergeant. If you live under my roof, you live by my rules. Or in my family, I used to say, it's my way or the highway. The drill sergeant sees themselves in charge, and what they say goes. The drill sergeant operates from a position of absolute authority and will tolerate no disobedience. The drill sergeant tells you what to do, where to do it, and when. The drill sergeants are good at leading groups and function well in hierarchical organizations. They pride themselves in getting things done. They are typically assertive, extroverted, and decisive. They are uncomfortable in ambiguous situations, especially when it is not clear who is in charge and what needs to be done. They like to know the big picture, but prefer to focus on details. They need to understand how what they do fits into the overall situation. One of their greatest fears is that something won't get done and they are to blame for it. They struggle with collaboration and hate loose ends. Disobedience is taken personally and is considered insubordination. They make great nurses, policemen, and foremen. They do well in the military, the medical field, and law enforcement. Common mottos for drill sergeants are, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, and because I said so. The ultimatum, drill sergeants send you to the brig for insubordination.
Now I will point out that when I first wrote the book, I got grief from people because they said drill sergeants don't send you to the brig. Different, different what? Yeah, or different groups, or different departments, or what's different services, right? Yeah, branches. Later on, I was told that there are situations where that actually does happen. I had a group of people debate this and say there are times when drill sergeants would be in a place to send you to the brig. So, all right, going back to you guys in the back, what resonated with you? Why did you pick that one? What were the words that mattered to you? Yeah, just tell me what words resonated with you that like hit a sweet spot.
For me, it was that if you want it done right, you gotta do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If something's not done, then you get blamed for it.
That drill sergeants hate that.
We're not comfortable with ambiguity.
Yep.
Black and white works.
And one of the things drill sergeants hate worse, most of all, is a boss that's over them that doesn't clearly tell them what their job is. Right? And so you don't know how to get a good grade. And they come in later and sabotage you by saying you should have done things they never told you to do in the first place. Okay, I need a volunteer from my middle group, from my coaches. I need a volunteer coach. I need a volunteer coach to come up and read that part. Yep.
The coach sets up the game plan, identifies strengths and weaknesses, and coaches you through different stages of development. The coach enjoys hands-on work and works together with you to set goals and accomplish them. The coach motivates you out of your own desire for achievement. The coach shows you the mechanics of performance and guides you through the steps to accomplish your task. Coaches love to work with motivated people, but struggle with people who are not passionate about success. They see disobedience as a challenge and seldom take it personally. They make great managers, therapists, and helpers. They do well in the field of human services, education, sports, and in the service industries. Coaches bench you for poor performance.
Okay. Coaches, what resonated with you guys in that? What made you go, I'm a coach?
It loves to work with motivated people.
Okay, that's a good one. What else?
Disobedience is a challenge.
Back there, it's seen personally. To the coach, it's seen as a challenge. Good job. All right, we need one of our 3 professors. Come on up here and read to us.
You know the assignment, let me know if you need help. The professor gives the assignment and grades the homework. Good professors give clear instructions and are always available to help when needed. Professors tend to focus on what you learn in the process of what you do more than what you do or how you do it. Professors recognize that the students have many different learning styles and let the children work at their own level as long as they reach the desired goal at the right time. Professors excel in working with motivated individuals but have little tolerance for those who don't want to succeed. Professors get frustrated when they end up doing the entire assignment. Professors want to guide the students but don't want to hold their hands. They hate getting caught up in the details and prefer to focus on the big picture. They live to delegate, and their success is determined by how well they manage the delicate balance of empowerment versus accountability. Professors view disobedience or failure dispassionately and choose not to enable students. They allow students to fail and see it as a learning experience. They make great project managers, visionaries, planners, and leaders. They do well in managing large projects with motivated teams of competent individuals. Ultimatum: the professor fails you for not completing your assignment.
Okay, what did the 3 of you see in this? What resonated with you? What made you feel like you're a professor?
I mean, I like the concept around the teaching and giving the information needed, but then it's hands off. You figure it out, but come to me with questions.
Good.
Working with motivated individuals, but little tolerance for those who don't want to succeed.
Spoken like a good professor. All right, here's your next assignment. You have 3 minutes, and I'm going to time you. Okay? Each group, huddle up, tell me what's wrong with the other 2 groups. Go. You got 3 minutes. What's wrong with the other 2 groups? Why do they drive you crazy?
We decided, like, with the professors, they tend to kind of go hands off when they'll state what they want done, and then they'll leave it up to the workers to figure it out, to do the job. And when the workers say they're finished, the professor's gonna go, no, that's not what I wanted, that's totally wrong. And then you have time wasted, and now you have to go back and redo the whole thing. And
So these guys' heads are in the clouds and your hands are on the work.
yeah, they're more hands off. With the coaches, sometimes they'll dwell on possibly one specific item or person that needs tutelage over and over again because they don't get it, where they're missing multiple facets of going over things with a lot of people or a lot of different objectives. Don't shake your head, no.
Okay. Coach, tell me what's wrong with your other 2.
The back group tended to be autocratic, inflexible, my way or the highway, and the professors tend to be laissez-faire, where I will teach you, it's up to you to learn, and if you do not do the assignment or do not learn, I fail you.
That's right. Now, Professor, what's wrong with these two?
Well,
And you professors can jump in if you guys because you're up here.
the back group, there's no opportunity for creativity on behalf of the workers to get it done. And the middle group, it's too much cheerleading.
Too much cheerleading. Okay. All right, let's. All right, you guys are done. Give them a big hand. You guys are done. Okay. Let's go to each group. What is sacred to the drill sergeant? Those are all important, but they're not. What someone said? What? The job? The mission. That's answer number something. Number 17. Drill sergeants value completing the mission. Go back to your spots. What do the coaches value? Collaboration of who? Who are the team? Who's on the team? Team is made up of people. Anyone ever see the movie Coach Carter? Coach Carter is a movie about a guy that goes in as a coach to a urban basketball team that has always been known as being really good, and they're really proud of their basketball team. But he realizes that all the basketball players, after they have their moment in the sun as a senior and they win the championships, they have horrible lives because they never graduated from high school. So Coach Carter goes in and says, nobody plays on the team unless they're graduating from high school. And he's worried about the people, not the mission, the people. And everyone hates him. But his deal is he cares about people. Coaches see people first. The mission is a means to train the people. Okay? People first. The mission is part of training them. Drill sergeants, the mission is first. If I tell you I will have a job done at a certain time, at a certain price, in a certain way, I'm not going to take a bunch of employees that screw that up. I have a commitment to you. The job will get done. If you are the head nurse on a nursing unit and you're in charge of making sure that unit runs well, you don't care that some graduate nurse has got problems with her boyfriend right now and might put the wrong meds into someone's vein. Get off my nursing floor. Get your act together. Come back here when you can put the right drugs into the right people at the right time the way I tell you to. We love drill sergeants in those environments, okay? I want a drill sergeant in that environment who cares first about getting the right drugs in my arm at the right time according to the doctor's orders. But the graduate nurse's supervisor is worried about that nurse. She wants to graduate that nurse. The group in the middle, it's all about the person, okay? How about the group up here? What about my professors? They're not interested in the mission. And frankly, they're ambiguous. They're ambivalent, rather, about the person. What do they care about? Where do they live? In the world of ideas. Ideas and principles. We need all three to survive in society. Now, what's interesting is the typical breakdown is 2 or 3 professors, less than 5 to 10%. Our coaches are 60% of the world. About 35% end up over here as drill sergeants. What do you think Hope and Home is made up mostly of? You can tell a lot about a corporate culture by learning who their people are. Coaches. We're 80% coaches. All my home supervisors are coaches. We have 4 hardcore drill sergeants. Who are they? They're the paperwork people. One of them is Jessica. She makes sure all the paperwork gets in. Another one's Vanessa. She makes sure all the paperwork gets in. Another one is Wendy. She makes sure everybody gets paid. They're not messing around. The mission's what's critical to them. If someone messes it up, they get in their face. Okay? Those are my drill sergeants. All my home supervisors are my coaches. We have 2 people that are professors. That fits into this whole category. Me and the director of our clinical director, Jackie. Both test out as professors. We're also, if you're familiar with the Myers-Briggs, we test out as INTJs or INTPs. She's more the J, I'm more the P. You're familiar with it? Yeah. For those who are familiar with it, this whole group in the middle are all FJs. The conflict style of FJs is very interesting if you ever want to look that up. All the coaches are usually FJs. Okay, what does that tell us? What does it tell you as a parent? The goal of teleology is to figure out what makes people tick. Okay? Figure out what makes them tick. What we've learned in science is nothing exists alone. Even a lot of the research, you remember all the stuff you might have heard at one time about string theory? There's a new theory out there called quantum gravity, and there's a guy named Ravelli who's doing a lot of stuff with quantum gravity out of Italy. It's interesting because it applies to the social sciences. What it says is nothing exists by itself. Everything exists together with other things. Gravity exists as it pulls on each other item. Everything has gravity. The same thing is about people. We don't exist in a vacuum. We exist in our relationship with other people. So we need to learn the teleology of the children coming into our home, but we got to know the teleology of ourselves. That's why it's important for us to ask ourselves, what are my 7 vectors? Who am I? What are my embedded values? And what's my typical style here? Now, it's not unusual for us to be in jobs that don't fit us. Today, my job fits me very well. At one point, I was in charge of a billing department in a hospital. I was required to be a drill sergeant. I hated it. I could do it, but when I got home at night, I was exhausted from it because it's not me. I was having to force myself out of my sweet spot. So you can do other jobs, but what you find is they're not your sweet spot. When you're working in your sweet spot, you feel engaged and energized by your job. When you're working outside your sweet spot, depending on how far outside, you feel exhausted. If you're a coach and you're having to be a drill sergeant or vice versa, it's exhausting. So it's important for us when we think about having kids in our home to understand their teleology, their embedded values, their frame of reference, right? But in order to do accommodation and assimilation right, we have to understand ours. And that's what we've been doing for the last hour. We've been looking at our vectors that control our embedded values. Now we're looking at where are we? What's our sweet spot? If you are a drill sergeant, you're going to be awesome with kids between 0 and 7 years old. Awesome. You're a professor, it may be a little bit of a challenge for you. If you're a coach, you're going to excel with that 7 to 12-year-old kid because they love coaches. If you're a drill sergeant, you're probably going to struggle with a 16-year-old. A professor usually does really well with 16-year-olds. Do we have any professor drill sergeant couples? Professor and drill sergeant. Okay. Oh, have you asked her? Well, that's interesting. Why don't you come ask her real quick? Come ask her.
You can ask her on that.
Yeah. Yeah, she can text her. You can ask her on the phone. We've wrecked some marriages this way.
I think she knows it. Well, you can answer?
We're all waiting to see. Are you a drill sergeant?
Drill sergeant.
Okay, you guys.
Good job.
All right, any other drill sergeant professor couples? What typically happens in the drill sergeant professor couple, we'll use the example of a female drill sergeant and a male professor. She gets really irritated at the professor because he's not helping. Time for bed, professor yells out, time for bed to a 4-year-old. That doesn't work. Drill sergeant knows how to go get the 4-year-old and maybe even does a little line dance. We're going to get in a line. We have a little game we play. We sing a little song. We do all these things. Drill sergeants are great Girl Scout leaders, by the way. They're phenomenal at making fun out of routine and doing these things, getting hands-on involved. And the professor's like, just let me know if you need anything. Okay, it's time for bed, you say to the 3-year-old. Let me know if you need anything. That is not going to work. Now what's going to happen is somewhere around here, the drill sergeant starts to battle, right around here in the post-collaborative stage, where we start to see the emancipation kick in, and the controlling, and the child doesn't want to be controlled anymore, and starts wanting to, figure things out for themselves. So suddenly, the professor becomes very popular, because that's the kind of conversation he thrives on. She says, I don't want to go to school. Professor says, why? Oh, that's interesting. And we have a conversation about it. Drill sergeant says, go to school. Because I said so. Child comes up to ask the drill sergeant and says, Mom just grounded me for a year. He said, I'll take away the grounding. So the drill sergeant gets mad at the professor because he doesn't back her up. He's like, how can I back you up? You grounded the kid for 2 years. Can't ground a kid for 2 years. So we start to see this battle here because the professor is great with 17-year-olds. The professor is answering the kind of questions that 17-year-olds have. What if I don't believe in God? What if I don't want to go to church? Let's talk about it. Whereas the drill sergeant's like, you're going to church. Okay? So we start to see that this is the sweet spot for the professor. When the child gets to the point where they're asking questions, and they want to challenge authority, and they want to understand why. Those are things that the drill sergeant hates. Challenging authority, asking why, because they did really good here. Coaches do a little bit better sliding to both sides. Now, what you want to look at is your relationship with your spouse. Are you both coaches? Is one of you a drill sergeant, one of you a professor? There is no ideal combination. What's important is to understand where you lie, where your spouse lies, because then you know where your strengths and weaknesses are. You're both drill sergeants, you're going to be great from 0 to 5. When the kids start saying no, somewhere around 3, you're going to struggle. But you'll do fine till 6 or 7. But when 7 starts happening, you're going to have to broaden your range and start doing some things that aren't natural for you. When they get to be 16, you're really going to broaden your range because they're going to be doing a lot of stuff that doesn't work. The typical battle zone is between the child that's here that wants to emancipate and the drill sergeant who's still here. So know where your strengths are, know where you reinforce each other, know where you have gaps, and know where you have to stretch to make things work. That's what's good about this exercise. It helps us to realize where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, and where we're going to have some challenges. We had an interesting question raised just a minute ago, and that is, do you see trends in parenting and, say it again, I'm kind of paraphrasing poorly.
Trends in the parenting styles of the parents whose children enter the foster care system.
Trends in parenting styles of the parents whose kids come into the system. Yes. The parents of the kids that come into the system 20 years ago were predominantly drill sergeants, and their kids came into care because they hurt them. Okay? It was interesting. 20 years ago, 80% of the kids that came into foster care came in because of abuse. In Colorado, this is different from other states. In Colorado, 85% of the kids in foster care right now are because of neglect. So it's flip-flopped entirely. We used to have a lot of drill sergeants. Now we have, I wouldn't even say parents. I wouldn't even put them on this continuum at all. The biggest issue in Colorado is methamphetamines, heroin, other kinds of drugs. Drugs cause parents to drop out. And so you see this absent parent, the ultimate permissive indulgent parent. What I can tell you is of fostering parents, this is a very interesting fact. We go back to those 3 islands of permissive indulgent, authoritative, and then rigid authoritarian. In the Christian world in particular, the rigid authoritarian is held up as the superior parent. Okay? You see them, they're really tough on their kids, and their kids are really in line, and they show up at church, and they don't cry, and they behave. Rigid authoritarian is held up pretty high. You hear words like spare the child, spoil the rod, or spoil the rod, whatever it is. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Question, which verse does that come out of? I'll tell you the answer, it doesn't. It's not biblical. Spare the rod, spoil the child does not exist in the Bible. It was a 16th or 14th century ode and it was about relationships. And it's been borrowed since that time, and people ascribe it to biblical background, but it isn't. And that's kind of interesting. The rod is used throughout, and the crown and the rod and thorns, they're figuratively used throughout the Bible, but there is no phrase, spare the child, spare the rod, spoil the child. And so what we see is, in the Christian world, rigid authoritarian gets held up real high. In foster care world, it fails epically. There are epic fails with rigid authoritarian. Each one of you took the AAPI. We screen out rigid authoritarian because that rigidity and that the inability to flex, the inability to accommodate, and combined with an authoritarian kind of almost violent persona causes disaster in foster care. We won't even bring in people that are in rigid authoritarian. We bring people in who are permissive indulgent, we can toughen them up. We can help them do a better job. I have great parents who are over here with permissive indulgent rather. So, all right, let's go. We're going to go back a little bit. I realize I skipped a couple of things. We're going to talk about interdependency versus self-sufficiency. DHS pushes self-sufficiency like crazy. There's even a group over at DHS, the department, called Teen Self-Sufficiency. We do not agree. We do not believe in self-sufficiency. In fact, I believe that self-sufficiency is a flaw, not a strength. How do we define self-sufficiency? Needing no outside help in satisfying one's basic needs. That doesn't exist. I'm sorry. We don't live in the 1700s or the 1800s. We don't live in a world where we can cook our own food, and do everything self-sufficient. We need other people. Some people we need to be able to buy food. We need to be able to buy shelter. We need to be able to interact with other people. We need to go to work. We have to interact with people. So what we believe in is interdependency. And this is a nice quote from Dr. Barton Goldsmith. Some people are very independent in relationships, others are dependent, and a number of people are codependent, which means they put aside their own well-being to maintain a relationship with another. The healthiest way we can interact with those close to us is by being truly interdependent. So what we're trying to foster is not independent children, but interdependent. An interdependent child knows how to get their needs met through other people, as opposed to getting their needs met without other people. So we want to teach children that sense of interdependency. Now, below here is draw the graph that describes the relationship between a child's growth and the parent's involvement. Any version of this is a passing grade. Our ideal one is this, and our goal is here. On number 15 and 16, those are all self-defined. Put your own things in those. 17, drill sergeants value completing the mission. Coaches develop the person. Professors value ideas. Now we're going to get to, yes?
Before you turn the page, will you read 13?
The goal of parenting is to move children from control to consignment. As parents, we want to move from being a person of control to being a person of influence. Because as people grow older, they naturally develop internal controls and become self-regulating. Healthy adults seek out people of influence and avoid controlling people. This is called the process of individuation or identity formation. It is natural for children to separate from their parents. They become individuals. They individualize. They find their own self-identity.
It's called the process of what?
Individuation. 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 It's becoming an individual. Okay? It is separating from your parents. The French have a word, it's called a rapprochement. It means rapprochement. I need to separate from you so I can reapproach you as an individual separate from you. Happens twice in a human being's life. When are they? When you are 3 or 4, you push away, called the terrible twos. I'm not you. I don't wear your shoes. I like my shoes. I am me. I say no. The process of a little kid saying no is very important. They need to go through that. That's the beginning of individuation. They're starting to see themselves as an individual separate from you. When's the second time that this happens? 13. I am me. I say no. I say no sometimes just to say no. And again, that's important. They're supposed to do that. We want them to do that. Children that don't learn to individuate don't do well in relationships. They give into a lot of stuff they shouldn't. This is why when Tara started talking to me about standing up for herself and setting limits on people treating her poorly, which is what she perceived it was happening in the kitchen, that people making dishes into messes to make her clean up, that was a process of her standing up for herself. That's individuation. All right, let's talk about the historical basis of T-based engagement theory. In medicine, you have a broken arm. You go to the doctor's office. They say, uh-oh, you have something wrong with you. Your arm is broken. We need to fix it. Nothing wrong with that. I like that plan. That's called problem-focused therapy. Something's wrong with you. Your arm is broken. We need to fix it. Okay? Freud, a long time ago, tried to find a way to turn psychology into more of a science. He's known as the father of psychology because he wanted to make it scientific. So he said, let's learn about structures in the brain, and let's give them names and start to give them some reality. So we have ego, id, superego. Let's talk about what a fractured superego or a fractured alternate ego state creates, and let's do these kind of things. So he started talking in functional ways. There's actually a department called functional psychology. There are classes called functional psychology where we talk about the different functions of the mind, okay? Because he wanted to make it more like hard sciences, okay? So that was important to him, that we could talk about things being broken. Well, if you go to see a psychiatrist today or a psychologist, they're going to find out what's wrong with you, just like a physiologist will. And the same way you have a broken leg, we'll talk about you having broken ego states or something's wrong with your brain, okay? There's an entire book called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. The DSM has codes, and these codes describe what's wrong with you as what's wrong with your mind, what's wrong with your emotions, what's wrong with your functioning. That's in the DSM. Why do they have these things? Why does medicine need these things? Why do we need diagnostic codes? You can't bill without a diagnostic code. Exactly. So for psychologists, psychiatrists to bill, or therapists, they have to bill under a diagnostic category. So each one of these DSM codes have a correlating CPT code that goes into a UB92 or a HCFA 1500, and they go off and they get paid. Okay? Is there something wrong with this? Well, I don't have a problem with you diagnosing my broken arm, but how about when you diagnose my child as oppositional defiant? Please find a teenager that isn't oppositional defiant. Or how about intermittent explosive disorder? Find me a teenager that's not intermittently explosive. So what happens when we start putting categories using problem-focused on people? Okay, I don't have a problem with broken arm. Or let's talk about mission work, okay? We go to Africa, we find a village, people are dying in the village because they don't have clean water, okay? So what do we want to do? Well, we have a problem. People dying that don't need to be dying. People suffering don't need to be suffering, okay? So what are we going to do about that? Well, we need to get medicine and we need to get clean water into this place. Well, we need a well, okay? And we need a way to deliver medicine. So we need airplanes. That's how you deliver things in Africa. We need an airfield. There's a great organization out there called Mission Aviation. They will drop medicine in and it will actually help us to build a well. Great. How are we going to get the airfield built? There's a great group out there that I know of called Friends in Action. That's called Friends in Action. They raise money to build airfields so we can bring Mission Aviation in so they can deliver medicine. This is great. What do we need now? We need money. So we go back to the United States as missionaries and we raise money. Nothing wrong with that. We have a problem. Here's the problem. We have a solution. Here's the solution. We have a cost. Here's the cost. If we can raise the money, we can provide the solution, eliminate the problem. No problem. That's a good thing. That's what missionaries have been doing for thousands of years. Identifying areas where we have problems, developing solutions, raising support to provide the solution. Many of you have probably been on mission trips. These are great things. I'm not going to say in any way, shape, or form they're not. However, what if our definition of their problem doesn't meet their definition? What if we go into American Indian reservations and tell them, as we did, that they're not raising their children right because they don't understand the English language, so we're going to remove your children and put them in boarding homes? Is that mission work or is that colonization work? That's where we're colonizing. Colonizing is where we take your culture away. We take your identity away. We take your children away. We take your way of life away because we've decided that what you're doing is wrong. Okay? So all of a sudden, the question of what is the problem, who is the problem, becomes a very important question. Who's deciding what the problem is? Interesting question, right? Who decides what the problem is? If I go into the doctor's office and I got a broken arm, we're both agreeing I have a problem, okay? But have any of you gone to the doctor? And the doctor's like, I don't know if that's a problem. It's like, I think it's a problem. He's like, I don't know, I think you're fine. You know, you go into a doctor's office and you limp a little bit. He's like, yeah, you limp a little bit. Well, if I'm a runner, I don't want to limp. So all of a sudden, maybe it's a problem, maybe it's not. I know people who have damaged meniscus or partially torn ACL. Is that a problem or is it not? Depends. What's your lifestyle? How badly is it torn? What do you need it for? How old are you? Those are all important questions. And in a perfect world, the doctor sits down with the patient and we decide whether it's a problem or not. If we agree it's a problem, then hopefully the insurance company agrees it's a problem. That's changing, right? And so we hope the insurance company agrees with us and it's a problem, then we can go about getting it fixed. And just like I said in the previous example, we now need to get somebody that has money that will pitch in the money to fix the problem. Okay? So problem focused is we agree there's a problem, we need to get it fixed. A while back, people started realizing this is a little insulting with some groups of people. They don't like it when we come into their community and tell them they have a problem. Whether it's the Indian culture or we go into the black culture and we say, how come, you know, it seems like there's an awful lot of baby daddies, not a lot of dads. We think this is a problem for you. Well, that's interesting. We're telling you, you have a problem. We're telling the Indian community, you have a problem. We're telling wherever we go in Asia, you have a problem. If we all agree, I think we're in a good situation, but what if we don't? What if we don't agree on the problem? Well, a while back, about 50 years ago, we came with a new concept, solution-focused. Okay? Solution-focused treatment is where we all agree there's a problem, but let's focus on the solution. I think it's written on here. Let's take a look at what I said here. Problem-focused treatment focuses on what is wrong with you. Solution-focused treatment focuses on what is wrong with you, but looks for solutions. Strength-based, you hear that a lot now. Who all hears that? Do you go to school and hear strength-based all the time? Okay, strength-based is the flip side of the same coin. Here's where you're supposed to be, here's where you are. This is the problem, but you got a lot of strengths. Let's talk about those. So in strength-based, focuses still on what's wrong, but we're going to highlight your strengths in solving problems. Anyone been to a strength-based staffing at a school? We're still going to set an arbitrary guideline for your kid should be here. Your kid is here. This gap, it's the problem, but he's got lots of strengths. Let's talk about the strengths. Okay? Whether we're talking about problem-focused, solution-focused, or strengths-based, we're still talking about the same thing. You're supposed to be here, you're here, this is the problem. Whether you're supposed to have this much functioning in your arm, you have this much, this is the problem we're talking about your body, or whether we're talking about clean water at your tribe, you're supposed to be here and you're here, or whether we're talking about performance in school, you're supposed to be here. All three of them are the same. They're dressed up differently, they're a little bit more polite as we go on in the ages, solution-focused is better than problem-focused, strengths-based is still better than problem-focused or solution-focused, but they're all still saying there's an arbitrary line drawn to where you're supposed to be. You're here. This is the gap. This is the problem. Okay? I'll tell you an interesting thing about that gap. I have friends that work in special ed. Anyone work in special ed? And I'll be honest, I don't diss teachers. I love teachers. We struggle a lot, but it's usually not with teachers. I have a friend that works in a special ed program. They have room in their school for 12 kids in special ed. Okay? Less than that, they have a problem because they can't justify the salaries of the people that are in the room. More than that, they have a problem because they have to come up with extra funding. So, when they do testing, they know in the back of their mind how many spaces they have open. So here you are as a parent thinking that testing is pure and it has this clean schedule. No. If we need kids, our gap gets bigger. We'll include more kids. If we don't need kids, your kid is fine. So here we are thinking that this is some sort of absolutely good scale that measures things. No, it has to do with what our availability is. I have a friend that does, one of our foster parents up in northern Colorado does recruitment for the state of Nebraska, for the University of Nebraska. Their criteria for getting into the school depends on how many spaces they have available. Goes up and down. And so as parents, we have to be aware of this. This is not some sort of tested, number that says if you score this number, if your blood count is this number, you're in trouble. No. These numbers go up and down. They are arbitrarily decided. So, teleologically based interventions focus on where you are going and asks, how can I help you get there? Teleology is a totally different way of looking at intervening in a person's life. In the teleological world, we say, where are you going? What are you about? Imagine if we went into an Indian tribe and instead of telling them what was broken with their tribe, we went in instead and said, what are you guys working on? Where do you want to go? How can I help you get there? What if someone walked up to you and said, I'm lost? And your response was, take a left right over there, and then a right 2 blocks later. Is that like the dumbest answer you could give? Because you have no idea where they're going. You would never tell someone who's lost where to go unless you ask them where they're going. And yet we do this with children all the time. Here's what you should be doing. Okay? We solve problems before we know what they are. Teleologically based interventions, TBI, or T-based engagement theory, says we're not going to set an arbitrary standard and say you need to reach it. We're going to meet you where you are, understand where you are going, and help you get there. And what's wonderful about this is we don't end up being your adversary. I'm not the person fighting against you going where you want to go. I'm your cheerleader. I'm going to get behind you and help you go where you want to go. I want to empower you to be who you should be, your teleology. A completely different way of looking at things. Imagine how different the concept of colonization or the concept of mission work would be if we went somewhere and we asked first, where are you going? What do you see as your strengths and weaknesses? How can I help you get there? As an example of this, Hope and Homes, we're required by the state of Colorado to do annual evaluations. I refuse to use the first 3 techniques. So our annual evaluation is very simple. Every employee in this company gets evaluated in January. And it starts by us handing you a piece of paper and saying, you tell me where you're going, how well you're doing at it, and how you think I can help you. And guess what? There will be no score, and there will be no raise based on any score. None. Whatever you come up with is up to you and your supervisor to figure out where you think you are, where you think you're going, and what you think you need from us. And then that's going to start a conversation where we figure out how can we help you get there. And it has nothing to do with your raise. Everybody at Hope and Home gets 1 raise. Every single employee, we get 1 raise. At the end of the year, we say, do we have enough money to give raises? If so, what's the range? And if so, what do we as a culture deserve? No one gets left behind. No one gets held up above another. Now, what's interesting about that is it creates a sense of camaraderie and hard work, and we work together, and we say, what are our goals? Where are we trying to get to? How do we get there? Teleologically based interventions do the same thing. Where are you going before I tell you how to get there? When two people head off to California together, and one gets there before the other, we don't say the one that got there later flunked to California. But what's interesting is we do that in math, don't we? Two students study math in the same semester. One gets the concepts before the other one does. The other one fails. You didn't get the concept in time. We don't do that at Hope and Home. Teleologically based interventions measure each person individually, not against each other. Traditional systems, number 24, define goals as the gap between where a person or project is and where it should be. The word gap becomes synonymous with the word problem. Do you see what happens when we start treating kids this way? Suddenly, we're talking about them being a problem. They are the problem. Okay? They're just different. Oftentimes, they're just rubber tree plants. So, 23? Oh, I didn't do 23. The basis of T-based engagement theory requires that we only measure people by their goals instead of by outside or arbitrary standards. We had one of my favorite kids of all time. Her name was Devin. And Devin was placed in one of our families up in Black Forest. And Devin's dad was a very wealthy and very powerful attorney in the Denver area, Arapahoe County. And he constructed a beautiful mansion of a house. And Devin's room was the only one in the basement. She had her own room. All the rest of the kids were in the other end of the house. He did this because he started every day of his life out by raping her in her bedroom before he went to work. And he did this for years. She was 16 years old. He'd been raping her since she was 13 on a regular basis. And finally, the information came out, and she told people, and everyone was furious. Why are you lying? Why are you saying these things about Dad? Why are you wrecking our family? All the kids went into foster care. Devin came down to Colorado Springs and was placed in a family up in the Black Forest area, a mom and a daughter doing foster care. Any guesses why we pick a mom and a daughter? Terrified of men, right? Beautiful girl. She had jet black hair, very short, very pale complexion, maybe 100 pounds and 5'5". And she was a really great sense of humor. Terrified of being around men, and her family was shaming her for why are you ruining Dad's life? By the way, part of the investigation found a condom that was used that morning with his DNA and hers in it in her bathroom, next to her bedroom. So the evidence was pretty compelling. Dad was in jail. And every couple of months, we would bring Devin up to Arapahoe County because she needed to meet with the DA, and he would show her the courtroom where she would testify and where she would sit. And we'd go up there with her. This process made her really anxious, testifying against her father. Her father would be looking at her, her whole family would be looking at her. They were also in foster care, but separate from where she was because they couldn't stand her and vice versa. So she was going through this process. About a year into this, that's how long it took before we started to get to the point of going to court. After about a year, she started going up every 3 months. Now, Dad is wealthy and Dad's smart. So Dad knew that time was always on his side. So we'd get right up to the moment when she was going to testify, and they'd get a continuance for one reason or another. And then we'd start all over again. She'd go back. Well, what happened was she was going to Falcon High School, and her teacher said, you know what? We don't know what's going on, but about every 3 months or so, Devin gets kind of bitchy. And we're like, yeah, do you want to know why? Again, let's understand why. Let's seek first to understand before we want to be understood. Let's understand why Devin's doing that. Once we pulled them aside and told them, they understood. And suddenly their frame of reference changed. Okay? Suddenly their perception of values changed, right? Now she's no longer a slacker. Now she's no longer bitchy. and they understood where she was coming from. Do you see how this plays out in that situation? And we were able to say, you know what? We don't want her to have homework. She's got enough stress. Part of what was happening was the stress of going up there was causing her to have extreme tachycardia. So her heart would start beating and anxiety so fast that we'd have to call the paramedics. The paramedics would show up and inject her, and I don't know the name of the drug, but it stops your heart. Then everyone sits around and waits with the paddles in hand to see if it starts back up again, and it does. Okay? It was so bad that we finally had to send her in for ablation surgery, where they go into the chest and they kill some of the nerves that stimulate the heart because of all this anxiety. This little girl was fighting for her life. The stress and stuff that was going on is like a war zone. It's very, very real. And so our interventions in her life have to be what is going on in her life, not some arbitrary standard that she's not doing well in English. Her English is supposed to be here and it's here. Let's get rid of all that crap. This is not a time for problem-focused, solution-focused, or strengths-based stuff. What we want to do now is say, what is important to Devon? What is important to Devon? And the answer was survival. We can catch her up in English. We can catch her up and she was taking Latin. We can catch her up in Latin. But what's going on right now? Keeping her alive and getting her to survive what she's going through. When we think differently, when we think, where are they going and how can we help them get there, everything changes. Do you see how that works? Number 25, TBI defines goals as the domain of the individual and not the community. 26, teleological interventions seek to understand the nature of an individual and strives to help them develop in the direction they choose. As a result, we are the cheerleaders instead of the judges or critics. I have a plant in my house. I've had it for over 30 years. And it goes like this. It's one of these with a real narrow kind of a stalk, about that big. And it goes up like this, and it goes like this, and like that. Why? Exactly. It goes towards the light, and when it was going towards the light this way, I turned it, and then it went like this, and I turned it, and went like this. That appears to be a crazy-looking plant until we understand why it did that. Once we understand that it's photo-seeking, light-seeking, then we understand it. My father was a psychologist, and he did an experiment with kids. In one of his experiments, they brought these group of kids in, and they said, imagine that this is your backyard, okay? There's a ball lost in the backyard. How are you going to find it? Well, one kid says, do something like this. Back and forth, a hard target search. Okay? Makes sense. Another kid says, same thing, another hard target search, go like this. The third kid I like best of all. He said, ask yourself where you left it. Go there first. If it's not there, begin some sort of systematic search. The fourth kid said, do something like this. And the psychologist looked at it and said, brain damaged. That's crazy. And they asked the kid, why would you search for something like that? That's weird. And the kid says, well, he was raised in the Appalachian Mountains. His backyard is a mountainside. No one would go up the hill and down the hill. You'd follow the geographic contours. Okay? Oh, dummy me. What he said looked crazy until we understand his frame of reference. His backyard looks like this. You'd follow the contours of the land. So our next question, the story of the light and the plant, the ball and the child, demonstrates the importance of that frame of reference we were talking about and understanding what is seemingly erratic behavior. Let's skip to 29. The study of teleology, understanding embedded values and frames of references, help us to seek first to understand. second to be understood. Love to nurture parents become people of influence in their children's lives, always seeking to help them become interdependent, to find and fully enjoy the uniqueness, the teleology of their lives. The biblical foundation for this theory of teleology is found in what scripture? For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and never to harm you, plans to give you hope in the future. Jeremiah 29:11. Let's close with the following story. My daughter and I went to Yellowstone. Anyone ever go to Yellowstone? What really cool stuff do they have in Yellowstone other than geysers? Bears. Bison. Exactly. It's a little bit spooky. You're walking down the main road there, and there's these bison right out in front of you. I took a shower, and my daughter came pounding on the door of the bathroom. And I come out, and there's a bison standing on the porch of our cabin. She's terrified. So they're everywhere. We were at Lake Yellowstone. We'd walk to the main place. We'd walk in between bison. It was wild. We went on a horseback riding trip with a Native American guide. Somehow it was just the two of us. And we're going around Lake Yellowstone. We come up around here, come around here, and we get to the very end, and he says, hang on. We have a bison in front of us. And I look, I don't see a bison. And he points on the hill, probably a quarter of a mile away. I'm like, seriously, dude? That thing's like this big. He's way over there. He's like, yeah, but they're dangerous animals. We need to be careful. And I point out, but I was just in the village, and I walked like within a foot of one. And he's like, yeah, I know. He says, and you know what? There's a great book that you can get it in the gift shop. It's called Amazing Deaths in Yellowstone. Okay? He says, unfortunately, lots of bad stuff happens with these animals. These are wild animals. He said, in fact, just the week before this that we were there, a woman had her child out and poured honey on her child's arm so one of the bears could lick it off, and they could get a picture of the bear licking the honey off of her daughter's arm. He said last year, one of the bears came down into camp, and he got into the garbage. And this woman came out and saw the bear in the garbage and threw him a marshmallow. And the bear ate it. And before she knew it, the bear was on his hind legs, hands up in the air like a circus bear, clowning for marshmallows. And she'd throw one, and he'd grab it. And a group of people gathered around her, okay? And they're like 50 people gathered in this big circle. They're all checking out this bear. And they were saying, this is the most amazing bear. This is an amazing bear. This is a great bear. What a great bear. Until she ran out of marshmallows. When she ran out of marshmallows, the bear got angry, started to charge her, and went like that with his paws, hit her here, broke her neck, sent her to the ground. All of a sudden, pandemonium. Everyone started screaming and running. This is the worst bear in the world. This is a terrible bear. This is an awful bear. This bear shouldn't be allowed to be alive. They should kill this bear. This is a bad bear. And the Native American Indian guide looked back at me and my daughter at that point and says, you know what? Same bear. Same bear story has stuck with me ever since. Same bear. Same bear was the greatest bear in the world. Same bear was the worst bear in the world and should be executed. Same bear. What changed? Our frame of reference. And we're going to learn more about this next week. Our performance system, how we treated the bear. I have kids in foster care who got adopted by parents who think he's amazing. Same kid, previous foster parents, says the worst kid they ever had. Thinks the new parents are being snowed. Kids go from home to home, and they go from bear to bear. From being the bear that everyone hates to being the bear that everyone loves. Frame of reference. We have to learn to look at kids differently. How are we doing for time? Okay, let's say a prayer and let's get out of here. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening, the time together, the time to learn. Lord, we hope that this helps us to see things and people differently, that we see people through the eyes of teleology, where they're going, who they are, what they want to become. And Lord, help us to become agents of change that come alongside these kids and help them become who they should have been before so many bad things happen to them, Lord. These are your children, Lord, and we just want to be blessed with the ability to help them regain their childhoods, regain their lives, and be part of the healing that they need. We just thank you so much for these amazing parents that have come here and given up their evening or giving up their lives to take care of your children, Lord. We just ask that you be with us as always in Jesus' name. Amen. Guys, thanks for joining us online.
Did we get an answer for number 28?
Did we get an answer for number 28? The same bear tells us that the basic nature of the bear didn't change. Our perception of the bear changed. The bear didn't change. Same bear. Thank you guys. Have a good night.